We run this rain, hail or shine every 2 weeks, and we get an interesting presenter who talks about something in the startup related space. Today, I'm sure you're all aware, we've got Jasky Singh, who's going to be talking about cold calling.
I kept thinking you have to be good to cold call. I would take these occasional long shots. This was his word, purely because you have been persisting with calls, let me give you a chance to do this one room. That has now resulted in $15 million worth of work. Great, that is the best way to practice. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, thank you all for coming out on this cold morning for an appropriately titled cold calling session. You're definitely very passionate about your business to hear a guy at 7:30 in the morning talk about cold calling. So my aim is to make it worth your time. Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll realize why. I know it's a big title to open up with, but cold calling has essentially changed my business and my life. And I'm hoping you can glean some insights from what I've done and hopefully apply it to your businesses in whatever facet it's useful for you, depending on what stage you're at. All right, 4 things I'm going to try and hit. Firstly, I will give you my background so you know what credentials and what I've done to put some scaffolding around what I'm going to be talking about. Then I'm going to share a couple of stories of essentially cold calls or times I reached out to a client and one of them resulted in $15 million worth of business. And why cold calling, even though a lot of people think of it as a very archaic method of trying to approach business or trying to grow your business, trying to validate an idea, trying to find a CTO and whatever else you're looking to do, why there is incredible power in cold calling, more so now than many years ago. And then some tips and tactics on how you can do it. So let's jump in. So my name, as I've probably said numerous times now, is Jasky. And when I started business, I know this is embarrassing, but the only dream I had when getting into business was to be a millionaire. That was it. Didn't matter how that happened. I could walk the streets of Northbridge late at night, do an open house. It didn't really matter. I just wanted to become a millionaire, right? And this was about 12 years ago when I quit engineering and started getting into business. And last year, the portfolio K1 investments generated $1 million per month. Now, I don't say that, to brag. The only reason I mention that is because that creates anger in some people. In some people, that creates skepticism because people come up and they say, oh, I've done this. It's like, yeah, bullshit. And the other thing I really want it to drive home is inspiration, because I don't really have any special skills, right? There's nothing magical that I've done. There's nothing, special talents I've been born with. The main thing was a few systems and processes that I followed diligently, and hopefully by sharing them with you, that can help you in your business and life. So as you can see, 10 years ago, the business I'll give you more information on was K2 Audiovisual. That's a theater room where we're stacking all our projectors because we didn't have an office nor could afford one. And this was our boardroom with 2 garden chairs. Okay, so we started with $500 each. There was 3 of us. We started the primary business we started, which is now Perth's largest AV provider, is K2 Audiovisual, over there to my left. And from there, we have now grown to these 6 active businesses. The one that Scott just mentioned is Butterfly 73, which is the most frequented nightclub in terms of aggregate numbers per week. Very, very popular, so please head out. I would like to take your money. Sarah was a bar in Malaysia that we exited just last year. And the other businesses is a speaker manufacturer called 2K Audio, Barber Bus, and a few real estate investments that we have. So those 6 businesses now comprise about 30 full-time staff, all started with K2 and has followed the chain now, which sits under K1 Investments. Cool, that's a bit of a background. Now we can jump into what else I do. I love doing stand-up comedy. That's been my hobby for many years. And also do something stupid on TikTok every so often. So please follow me there as well. That was me at Regal Theatre. I performed with my videographer, who's also an amazing comedian. We had a sold-out show before I had my daughter, and then I had to quit stand-up comedy. So that's what happens when you have kids. Okay, here's a bit of a timeline. And to get into the cold calling side of things, the background is just to, like I said, just to give you a perspective of the whole picture of what business I do engage in. So 2010 is when I quit engineering. I did a double degree in electrical engineering and computer science. At that point, I was like, I was never going to do this. It was never my interest. I did it for my parents. And at that point, I was like, this is enough. I always want to do something for myself. I always enjoyed sales. I don't know why. It was just something I gravitated towards. So 2010, I left for 2 years. I did a whole heap of things. I'm not going to get into that. And then 2012 to 2020, there was an arbitrary rule. I don't know why I set this up, but I told myself I'm going to make 20 calls every single work day, so Monday to Friday, and that's one thing I will not do. Every day, that was a simple system. I said, look, everything else can fall to the wayside. It didn't matter as long as I made those 20 calls. And up until 2020, till the pandemic hit, and then it was no longer necessary for me to do so, I never missed the 100 calls that I did per week, which equates to 38,400 calls that I reached out to potential clients, right? Some of them were repeat calls, but you get the idea. So it's literally the only system that I diligently followed, and it's had the biggest impact to my life. So what I'm trying to share today, and I hope at the end of this you find it valuable, is this was the talk I wish I had heard when I started. Even though I did those 20 calls every single day, I kept thinking you have to be good to cold call, right? If I'm not good, if I have fear, if I get a whole bunch of these rejections, which I'm sure you all heard, if you're in business, you got to get used to hearing these rejections. This is part and parcel of being in business. That's probably why you've all gotten into it. You want to develop some thick skin. But I just needed to go back to my 20-year-old self and just say, you don't have to be good. You just have to do. Because I'll give you a couple of examples which, because I've talked to many people about cold calling and how you can grow your business, how you can reach out to people, and they're always like, oh, I find it very nervous. I'm not very good. What if someone says something and throws me off? I will show you different points on the power of cold calling. The fact that you can just do it is a big step. But the main thing is, by just doing it, if I told myself just do it, don't think about how good you are, it would have just made the whole process a lot less tense. Okay, so here's one example that I hope can show you the impact cold calling can have to your life. This is the room that I made most of my cold calls in before we had an office. This was my dad's study room, which looks like the room of a psychopath with notes on the wall staring at me, motivational quotes, and I was dressed like I'm looking for donations. I didn't have an office. This was where I just sat, morning to evening, and I would make those calls. So the call that I made, this was 2-3 years into starting the K2 audiovisual business. I would take these occasional long shots. Most of our calls were to education that I got relatively comfortable with. Then occasionally I'd want to call a tier 1 corporate just to stretch my abilities a little bit. So that day I reached out to Roy Hill. I don't know if you're familiar with Roy Hill. It's one of Gina Reinhardt's umbrella businesses, one of the biggest mining businesses in the country, and if not in the world. So I called the reception. They put me through to buildings and facilities manager. And here I am, I've got like sweat patches under my arms. I'm like so nervous because normally I just wish when I ask to be put through to that person, they're just not there, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, I tried, whatever, who cares? But this time I got put through. He answered the phone. And here I am, I'm like stumbling through my words, not even getting to the point of it. I'm like, I do audio visual and just some convoluted sentence that I eventually spat out of my mouth. And the reason I'm telling you that is because at that time, it was just serendipity. They had an audiovisual provider that was catering to all of their AV needs at the time, but they had a couple of jobs they weren't happy with. And purely because I called at that time, this gentleman was wonderful, right? He's become a close friend of ours for many years, but he said, look, I'm happy to give you a chance. Just pitch for this job. And for them, pitch for this small job. It was a 6-figure job, so I started sweating even more, right? And he was like, yeah, I'm happy for you to just give this a try. It was a cinema that they wanted to set up for the FIFO workers in the Pilbara. And for us, this was a huge opportunity. I said, yeah, I would love to do it. And then, put the phone down, and finally my heart rate came down. I could breathe. And And then he sent through the request. So the call is one thing, and then we put in 200% in the proposal, making sure that we went over and above on every single word and answering every qualitative criteria to put essentially 200% of our best foot forward to try and win the job. And fortunately for us, we did win that job. And as we won that job and developed a relationship with Roy Hill, that has now resulted in $15 million worth of work, purely from that one terrible, stumbling, sweaty, nervous call. Right? And it has changed the trajectory of our business. From there, working from home, we got an office, got staff, grew into from a small business to no longer a small business. And I hope that story just elucidates what a call can do. And that's the largest abstract video wall in the Southern Hemisphere, which sits in the foyer of Roy Hill's offices near the airport. And when no one was looking, I took the opportunity to put a photo of myself up on there. And another example, there's hundreds of stories, but I want to give you two examples because stories do drive home the message. The second one is more on the side of persistence. And the reason I share this story is, I'll explain why. I'll tell you the story first. So Baldiver Secondary College, when we started our AV business, about a year or two in, they were doing a new build. So this was going to be a new construction for that school. There was about 40 classrooms that needed to be done, a sizable job. And by 40 classrooms needing to be done, I mean the technology that goes into those classrooms. So things like this. I tried to reach out to the principal, called, ignored many times. I kept trying. He wouldn't take my calls. And awarded that new build to somebody else. And I don't know why, and I think in hindsight, I look at why I kept going. I was like, look, I don't feel like I want to let this go. So every month I would just make a call. Never pushy, never asking, never, trying to get into his face or make him uncomfortable, just to check in. Hey, I'm still here, can we help? I'm still here, can we help? Eventually he would take my call here and there and just brush it off, say, yeah, all right, I'll reach out to you when we need. Again, when I called, serendipitously, there was one room that they weren't happy with when they fitted out their new build. And he said, hey, look, this was his word, purely because you have been persisting with calls for such a period of time, let me give you a chance to do this one room. And that was the room that we did. And as we developed that relationship, again, put 200% in to do a great install, support with training, constantly provide how-to documents, the usual stuff that you need to do once you've been given the opportunity. I don't need to really tell you guys know that. Your product has to be impeccable. I'm just giving you the pre-part of the product, is how do you get to that client. Got an opportunity, and eventually he realized the 40 classroom investment he put into the new build was not as good as what we had done. So he ripped out everything and we installed new systems in all those 40 classrooms. They've had several stages since, which has resulted in 140 classrooms, but more so, he loved the work that we did so much that his testimonial has now resulted in 10 more new builds. Again, wasn't a great call. I just kept calling. I just wanted to check in. So serendipitously, sometimes the timing can match up. Okay, the story's out of the way. Now, a few things that I want to try and change the narrative. Anytime I talk to, so thank you for Scott for actually getting me up here, because anytime I try and tell someone you should cold call, they think, what else should I do? Start fire with 2 rocks and a branch? Like, what else archaic method should we get into? Should we start carrying Walkmans? But seriously, I want to change that narrative, because I actually think cold calling is equally as powerful now as many years ago. And I'll tell you why people have such a negative opinion about cold calling is because of my brothers and relatives from India calling you consistently from a pretend Australian number with that 3-second silence before you answer the call, and then hello sir, and annoying the hell out of you. That's why people think cold calling sucks. Right now, our mobile phone is within arm's reach any time of the day. Even while you're sleeping, it's there. You wake up, you just decide to check your phone for something, right? In the middle of the night. So if you can call someone, you can reach them, right? If it's done properly, you can reach people a lot better than you could many years ago. If there was a landline, the person's not there, you can't reach them. And I know many of you are probably trying to validate a business idea. Is that True. Hands up. Anyone validating? Yes? Yep. For me, it was incredibly valuable to validate any new ideas by just calling potential customers and seeing if they would become customers instead of spending months, years developing something and tweaking an app and never actually knowing how do I validate this. And I've just foregone all this investment, time, resources, whereas a few phone calls could have saved you that entire headache. And probably the biggest point is no one is going to part with their valuable investment until there's a human interaction. Think about all the big purchases or anything valuable you've purchased. It's rare that unless there's a human at the other side that you've spoken to, that you connect with, that's likable, that you develop rapport with, that you're going to part your money. Yeah? I have a graph that hopefully helps thereafter to drive that home. Differentiation is a big thing. How many of you actually cold call? Hands up. Oh, well, okay, a lot of you. That's impressive. I was expecting one hand. But look, you're probably in the small subset. I honestly don't think many people do it. There is a level of differentiation. There's a high barrier of entry. And sending an email, sending a DM is very easy. Picking up the phone and actually making a call, you're in the 1%. So already you're differentiating yourself as long as you do it properly. And I don't have to tell you personal development. I honestly don't think there's any better way of developing your communication skills, your comfort, being comfortable in a situation where you're getting resistance, how to be brief, how to get to the point, how to relate to someone very quickly, as cold calling is. Okay, the main pushback that most people will give you is, oh, why do I need to cold call? I can just send an email. I can send a DM on Instagram. Yes, you can. But this is an arbitrary graph, so it's not based on any study or figures. It's just what I've pulled out based on my experience. Is if the value of your item is negligible and low, then emails and DMs are great because you don't care who that person is. The cost is, there's not much resistance. It's a low cost item. It's fine. I don't really need someone to speak to me. But as soon as the value of the item is greater, you have to speak to that customer. Be it through phone call, be it through meeting, be it Zoom, a virtual meeting. So you can exclude emails and DMs. I'm not saying you do one or the other. It's not mutually exclusive. You do both, but it's very rare you can exclude the call. Yep. Anyway, let's get into the important stuff. How do I do cold calling? Everyone's different. This is my 2 cents. You do whatever works for you. But here's what I've learned over the years of doing those essentially 40,000 calls. Now, if you're starting, the biggest problem I had was the fear. You're nervous to pick up the phone because of the rejection at the other end. And it's your ego on the line, right? So the easiest thing is you just have to do. I said that at the get-go. You just have to do. And if it alleviates any fear and you haven't done a lot of cold calling, it seems a lot of you have, but any of you that haven't, my recommendation would be call as an alias. Because as soon as you don't call as Jasky, you can call as James. You're only practicing. You're not trying to manipulate anyone. You're practicing. Call as James. Now it doesn't matter. It's no longer Jasky calling. It's the Slim Shady version of you. Do that. It's fine. If that takes away the fear of your personal ego being on the line, great. That is the best way to practice. Okay? And then that's it. That's all you need to do if you're starting. If you've done it a few times, which is a lot of you here, never use the words sir and ma'am. That's disgusting, right? If you ever call someone and say, hello, sir, I would be surprised they don't hang up in the next 5 seconds. That's terrible. Don't try and be overtly friendly. Are you super over the top when you call a friend? Hey, bro, how's it? You're not doing that, right? But salespeople feel like they need to do that. Don't waffle. Get to the point. You're buying time from a client. Be quick. Be sharp, be effective. You don't need to be overly friendly. You need to be relatable, casual. Is this a good time? Doesn't matter. They've answered the phone. Why are you asking, is this a good time? Because that gives them a chance to say no, right? Just overtly friendly feels like immediately this is a sales call. right? You have something valuable to offer this person. You're actually doing them a favor. As long as your product can meet the client's needs, that's the first point, which I'll go through in a couple of slides. If you're doing that, that is the most important thing anyway. So why is this a good time? This is a great time. You've got someone that you can help now, so don't worry. Get to the point of what you're trying to do. Look, I don't need to go through all of them, but you don't be too scripted. You don't have to, you have to qualify. Make sure you get to answering the right questions. I always have this good analogy is when I always go to a real estate agent and they're trying to present a house, it seems like they don't even want to know what part of the house is important to you. You walk in, I may love a balcony that overlooks the water. You, sir, may like a big garage because you have 7 Rolls Royces. The other person may want a big theater room. You may want an art space. Yet, if it's the same pitch and same function, yes, we have 4 bedrooms, and then here's the bathroom, and here, you haven't really found out what's most important. I may not care that there's 4 bedrooms. I'm happy with 1, but if there's a balcony, I'm sold. So qualifying is very, very important, and people don't. You don't have to do this over calling. Anything, you must qualify that you're disseminating the right information that person wants to hear. And try not to have an ask, right? Try not to have an ask, because the cold calling is not about having an ask. The moment you ask something, you've now put your reputation on the table. Try and delay it as much as possible, and that'll make more sense. I love this quote because this sums up how I think of cold calling, and that is, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. Okay, so preparation is essentially the most important thing. When you're picking up the phone, you want to be as effective as possible. So if you've done enough of the groundwork, if you've set up the scaffolding as well as you can, then you can go in like a surgeon and maximum input for maximum output. All right, I'll end with a few tactical points and then we can answer any questions if need be. How do you do it effectively? And I'm happy to share this slide if you guys want. There's no problems. I can share it with Scott and he can distribute it to all of you. The main thing you want to do is, because calling is not scalable, you have to make one-to-one call. You can't write one email and then send it out to 10,000 people. You want to call people that marry your product to, your product needs to marry what they're looking for. Make sure that you're deciding on your leads very carefully, right? Because you're calling haphazardly, getting a list of generic customers and just calling one after the other is an absolute waste of time. Know what your product is, know who your target market is, know how it can be valuable to them, know who the decision makers are, and then compile that lead list. Does that make sense? Because just generically calling anyone, like if I generically call you and my offering has no relevance to you, that's a waste of time. Whereas an email doesn't matter, right? I still think you shouldn't send that email, but it doesn't matter because you haven't expended a lot of energy. How do you find these leads? LinkedIn is one of the greatest sources. If you go to LinkedIn, you know who the decision makers are. You can search essentially any decision maker in any corporate firm, even schools, education, whatever your target market is. Call the reception. There's many ways you can just ask, hey, I am developing a way to recognize art. Can you tell me who makes the decision on your procurement? Just ask the general question, hey, I want to know who decides on what products you use in your office. Oh, it's Dave from building management. Fine, thank you. You can just find out very easily. So you're not navigating an absolute waste of time. Use your friends, use your clients, get referrals. Tell them, hey, this is what I'm doing. You will not realize the power of your friend circle, and the 1 or 2 connections detached can be so powerful for your business. Just asking your friends, this is what I'm doing. Do you know anyone that I may be able to chat with about this or get some guidance, or someone that might find this useful? And they become your sales team. They'll introduce you to people. Once you've got your leads, the second thing I typically do is, this is probably the most important. If you're going to make a call, you don't want it to be a cold call. Even this talk is called cold calling. Nowadays, when I make a call, it's rarely ever cold, and I'll explain why. You just turn it into something that's warm. And here's a distinction. If I'm calling anyone and I'm just saying, hey, I'm Jasky from K2 Audiovisual, I want to set, what we do is we do projection systems and we also do control systems. Would that be of interest to you? Hang up, never call me again, right? Whereas any bit of research, any bit of planning, any reason that I can create, let's say I'm calling SpaceCube, this is not one of our clients. Hey, Scott at SpaceCube, we thank you for talking to me. We did a job just around the corner for NX100. What we did there was a projection system with some speakers. Can I just send you some information? Or can I ask what you're looking for? You've made some sort of connection to make it warm, as opposed to it just being a generic script that you've just spat out at that person. Find another reason. Maybe we have this system where all the construction jobs in Western Australia are accessible to us. So we can see which builder, which architect, which client is working on a construction job. So I can just call that client. Hey, I'm calling about 26 St. George's Terrace that you're currently working on. Can I get some information on what you're looking to do with AV? So does that make sense? Just you need a reason when you're calling. Generic calling is cold. That is the hardest and most brutal method of doing it. Just make it slightly warm. Come up with a reason. Know what your pitch is. Maybe use a reference. Like I said, hey, we did a job for BHP. Now I'm calling Roy Hill. Hey, do you mind if I send you the case study that we did for them if you're ever looking for anything similar? Develop a reason. If you have a reason for the call, it becomes warm. This one I can go through very quickly because it's probably self-explanatory to most of you, is if you're making a call to a potential client, it is not about getting the sale on that call. That's ridiculous. Unless you're selling a very low value item, then yes, I can understand. You can go, hey, I'm selling a pen. It's worth 50 cents. You want to buy it? Yes, I'll buy it. But anything that's substantial, anything that's a high ticket item, you are just moving that sale one step forward. That's all you're doing. Whatever that means to you, just moving it one step forward. And finally, this is something you need to do diligently, like that previous quote that, if you're going to chop a tree, spend 4 hours sharpening the axe, is now you've done the pre-work. You've got your leads. You've developed the reason. You know what your goal is, what next step you want to move forward. I'm sending information, or I'm doing whatever, or I want to set up a meeting. You know what that next step is. Now, set aside uninterrupted period of time, an hour, 2 hours, whatever your day allows, and do nothing but make the calls to these leads. Because you do that day in, day out, over a year, an hour, anyone can spare an hour. And I guarantee you, that 1 hour of making those 20, 30, you should be able to do 20, 30 calls. A call every 3 minutes is very reasonable, because a lot of them you're not going to be able to reach, depending on what time you're calling. If you do that over a year, where your business is now and what your goals are in life, to find a CTO, find a partner, find a VC, in a year, you will have such a magnanimous difference to your business just by diligently following that process. That's literally all I've followed. Everything else is flexible. I was inflexible to making those calls. So if you do that, that is the most effective way of doing it. Preparation probably takes an hour, and the actual work probably takes an hour. The final thing I want to leave you with, in the end, for your business and for your life, because it can change the trajectory, like those few calls have actually changed a lot of things, because you develop relationships with close clients that are now your friends. It impacts your life. It impacts how you feel about yourself, how you carry yourself. So this is kind of, I don't know, I remember this quote that circulates through my head is that the people you need to make proud are not your mum, not your dad, not your wife, not your kids. It's your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self. So when you're working in your business, just keep that in mind. Sometimes you get driven by the money, like I did, always wanting to make money. What would have made you proud as a young kid, and what's going to make you proud if you look at it in hindsight when you're 80 years of age? Do that. And as long as your business is in line with that, as long as your life trajectory is in line with that, then I hope you'll be happy and joyous about where you're spending your time. Hope that was valuable. Thank you for having me up here. Thank you, Scott and Morning Startup, and thank you for attending.